is your...
Hello. Welcome to everyone in the Del Mar Center Hall, at home on Zoom, and later on YouTube. My name is Linda McCabe. I am the chair of the Sea Ranch Forum. Today we're going to be talking about Measure H, which will be on the March primary election. I have a few things first. Safety first. For those, should we need, the doors you came in and all the other doors that say exit over it are exit doors. Hopefully we will never need it, but there is an AED on the wall. And should anyone need to use the bathroom, it is across the walkway into the building over there. Today, our host is going to be George Calys, and he will be introducing the speakers, and I'm going to let him do it now. Thanks, George.
Thanks, Linda. And thank you all for attending. We're going to talk today, we're going to hear from several experts on Measure H. Measure H is a sales tax increase that will be on the March ballot in however many weeks that is. Oops.
Until there's something to look at, I was leaving it so that Steve...
So you're going to hear from several people, and we're going to get some background on how fire protection works here on the coast, which isn't as simple as one might have thought, and it doesn't happen automatically, and I learned a lot about it, and I hope you will too. We're going to start off by talking about that fire protection on the coast, how that works. Bonnie Plakos will give us some background on that. Bonnie has been a sea rancher since 1987, is that right? And then moved here full-time in 2005. Then, I guess because you didn't have enough to do, you joined the local fire department in 2007, and now you have plenty to do. She also works for the Coast Life Support District as an EMT and does IT support there. She's the chief of our local fire protection district. That's Bonnie Plakos. Then we're going to move a little bit to the fire district status and outlook. How's our fire district doing currently, and how do things look in the future? It's important that you get a little bit of an idea, because that will explain why we're looking at a sales tax measure. It's the future. Today we're in good shape, but things change in the future, and so we have to be ready for it. We'll also talk about operational and administrative needs within our fire district. Yes, our firefighters are volunteer people, but there's also office stuff to be done, administrative and operational needs, and those change over time. And so the funding from Measure H will help with that. That'll finally bring us to Measure H itself, which will be, sorry, what's the date of the election? March 5th, thank you. It's the same, it's when we vote the primary elections, and Measure H, I believe, is the only measure on our ballots here at Sea Ranch this year. So we'll learn about what is Measure H, what does it provide, what happens with the money, where are the needs, how will it go there, and just as importantly, Measure H, the money raised through Measure H will be dedicated to fire districts in Sonoma County. So it's not like a lot of tax increases where the money just goes into one big pot and everybody fights over it. This is dedicated to our 31 fire districts. Is that correct, Bonnie, in Sonoma County?
I don't know the number. Chief Akre might when
Okay, I think I read that. Well,
we're down, pardon me, we're down to, Bonnie, yes, we're down to 19 fire departments within the county now.
Oh, okay, thank you, Chief.
Down from about 44 just 7 years ago.
It's amazing how these voices just come out of the ether, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So our fire districts in Sonoma County, this money will be dedicated for the uses that they need. It can't be used for anything else. So we'll learn a lot about Measure H. Then we'll wrap up with questions and answers from you who are here in person, or any of our folks who are joining us by Zoom. We'll take some questions, and the appropriate person will answer them. With that, let me introduce Chief Bonnie Plakos.
Catherine? Stopped working. Know what that was. Anyway, hello. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you taking your time on the middle of a nice, even though it's raining a little bit, a lovely Saturday. And I want to thank Marty and George for helping put this together. And I really want to thank Chief Akre for taking time out of his Saturday, because if he has enough meetings. So anyway, we're going to talk about initially, if we're going to talk about possible funding measures and possible ballot measures, it's really important to know, well, how does fire work here on the coast? You know, what's the big deal? So, these were George's introductory slides, so sorry. These are our topics. And so I'm going to explain the fire department, how it works, and who comes. So one of the first questions is, you call 911, who comes? Obviously, the North Sonoma Coast Fire Department comes. Also, CAL FIRE comes, and we're going to talk about our relationship with CAL FIRE in a little bit. Coast Life Support District, who I work for, provides the ground ambulance service for here, actually everywhere from Irish Beach down to Fort Ross. We have a big district, they have a bigger district. And we don't want to forget Sonoma County Sheriff and California Highway Patrol, not necessarily on all 111 calls, but they do help us when we need it. And also their helicopters really help us when we need it for air evacuation, when the others can't do it. And a really important part of fire service on the coast is that we have a very strong mutual aid system. And not everyone is aware of this, but there's South Coast Fire in Wallala, there's Rubber Coast Fire up in Point Arena, and then to our south, there's Timber Cove Fire and Fort Ross Fire, which is now part of the Gold Ridge Fire Protection District. And to our east is the other NSCFPD, Northern Sonoma County Fire Protection District. But the point is that we're rural, we have a very large area to cover, we don't have that many people, and so it's really important for us, and we do it all the time. If you all read the ICO this week, North Sonoma Coast was in Wallala 3 times in 36 hours to go to fires last week. But it's very important. We go to Timber Cove, they come help us, and we couldn't respond to everything if we didn't have that. So that's kind of the high level. And what exactly is NSCFPD? It's a public district, a special district in California, a very particular kind. It's a fire protection district. It was formed in April 2016. It covers Sea Ranch, Stewart's Point, and Annapolis. It's 172 square miles. It covers the area that used to be covered by the Sea Ranch Volunteer Fire Company and the Annapolis Volunteer Fire Company. But we merged and went independent in 2016. And we are an all-hazard department. That means we don't just go to fires, we don't just go to medical. Anything you call 911 for, we go. Slides, traffic accidents, trees down. I have been to 1 cat in a tree call in my career, 1, honest. And we have also responded to a raccoon stuck in a radiator. So, okay, and it's important to remember that this is North Sonoma Coast. We're showing a map here. It is 172 square miles, and that's a lot of ground. And Sea Ranch, even though it has the most people, Sea Ranch is just this little bit over here. There is all this other territory. Okay, so that's what it is. Who is it? At the present, we have 16 volunteer firefighters, responders who are either firefighters or EMTs or both. We have 4 support members that don't do active safety response, but they help out with stuff. And we have 5 CAL FIRE staff. So I want to explain a little bit about the relationship there. We use funds to contract with CAL FIRE to provide us with 24/7 response. And that, at the moment, that is 5 full-time people. And that's how many you need to have a minimum of 2 on duty at any time. The standard for on duty at, what's called an engine company is 3. And we're not there yet. We're at 2. We really would like to get to 3, and we should get to 3. Right now, it's 2. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the stations. In terms of people, I'm the volunteer fire chief. We have an assistant chief, Chuck Breyer. Many of you may know him. He lives in Annapolis. He's works for the Sea Ranch Association as well. We have 2 fire captains, Captain Plakos, who's right there, and Captain Barton, who's not here. And our 2 CAL FIRE captains are Redwood Miller and Pat Bryant. The district is governed by 5 board members elected by the citizens. Again, it's a public agency, public board meetings. You're all welcome to come to a board meeting anytime. We'd love to see you. Here's a recent picture of our motley crew. And you may notice that we're not exactly a young crew. We're not exactly the burly 22-year-old firefighter guys. Okay. Just to highlight some important stuff. We contact with CAL FIRE. This is really important because having 24/7 career firefighters in rural area is something that many areas cannot support and don't have. Our 2 people are the only 24/7 career firefighters on duty from here all the way to Bodega Bay. So there is a big gap. And to the north, South Coast does have a couple people that work, but just office hours, 40 hours a week to be available. And then after that, there are no more career 24/7 staffing until you get to Mendocino. So, our CAL FIRE people help out with the neighbors, and they're very, very busy. Even though I'm saying it as if we're different, our contract people and our volunteers, we respond together as one fire department. We work together. We have a chain of command within us. It isn't like CAL FIRE is over there and the volunteers are over here. We respond together. Besides going on calls, our contract with CAL FIRE has them providing day-to-day operational oversight of the department, helping to manage our inventory of apparatus, to maintain our apparatus. They run our training program for volunteers. They do building inspections. And that's a real benefit also, because one of the other problems having rural volunteers is they have to get trained somewhere. And usually that means they have to drive a long ways to attend a training academy somewhere, or you have to pay a lot of money to keep bringing other trainees in. But we have very well qualified people here who do the training right here on Sea Ranch. And that's a great benefit because we can get volunteers and you can learn most of your things right here. Something else just to mention that is available, this is a picture of the 1451 crew a couple years ago. 1451 is a CAL FIRE engine that is staffed here at Sea Ranch, but only during fire season. As many, many CAL FIRE stations are only staffed during fire season. If we did not have our contract year-round people, then this station here at Sea Ranch would only be staffed during fire season. But during that time, they are here and they're on the state mission. We don't give them any money. They have nothing to do with us financially or organizationally. They're busy going to wildfires, doing fuel management, and doing other projects. But while they're here, they help out. And if we need help on a call, they go. So it's really nice to have them. Just some specifics, we have 4 stations. The first one is the one on that you've all seen on Highway 1 next to the chapel. This station is owned entirely by our 501c3 and maintained with the donations that the 501c3 gets. It's not staffed, but we have apparatus here, and it's where many volunteers respond to pick up apparatus and go on a call. The other station you're probably familiar with is the CAL FIRE station on Annapolis Road. This station is owned by the state, but it houses, we share it with the seasonal folks, and then our contract folks are there as well, and that's where they live 24/7. We actually have to pay rent to use the station to house our contract people and our apparatus. We have two other, can't really call them stations. They're metal buildings with stuff in them, and obviously not staffed. But we are fortunate, we have a metal building up on the, that one, up on the county road yard, and then this is at Horicon School, and we have some apparatus in there so that Annapolis volunteers can get to a piece of equipment and get to something that's more out there quickly. I got a little public service announcement. We're having an open house on April 20th from 10 to 2 at the CAL FIRE station. And really, we really want a lot of people to come to this. It's multi-purpose. It's just to say hi, to encourage everyone to learn more about the fire department, see the apparatus. Yeah, we'll let you squirt some water. We'll have some hoses set up. But we're also looking at this as a recruiting event, because as we'll talk about, our volunteer base is shrinking. We're not getting new volunteers. It's becoming more difficult to sustain the department. And we would like to have an opportunity for anybody who's interested, maybe even considering volunteering, come to this and you'll learn a lot. The district does have a website, the initials, North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District.org, and you can find, and a lot of all the business stuff is here, the budgets, the audits, the minutes, the agendas, and then information about the district. I do want to mention, I said there's a associated 501c3. There is one. It's called the North Sonoma Coast Volunteer Firefighter Association. It was formed in 1973. So it wasn't called that. It was called the Sea Ranch Fire Department then, but this is its name now to match our district. It owns and maintains a station on Highway 1. And they raise money, and they use that money to take care of the station and to provide equipment, training, clothing, or anything else that the volunteers need. And of course, you're familiar with the picnic and Christmas tree sales. They also have a board. It's not a publicly elected board. It's mostly made up of firefighters. And they have a website too. And you're welcome to go there. Their website's a little more fun because it doesn't have all these rules imposed on it by the government. So, and of course, the first public announcement, picnic, May 26th, be there. So that's like just a quick overview of how everything works. And Marty, our board chair, is going to talk.
Thanks, Bonnie. We're going to turn over the program now to Marti Campbell, who many of you know and maybe some of you don't. Marty's been very active here at the Sea Ranch for a number of years. She served for a total of 15 years on the board, not all at once. Wasn't it broken up, or how did? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Just asking. Yeah, and she served in a number of capacities, both as board chair and treasurer, and served multiple terms on the finance committee and the solar array task force. These were all important efforts that have gone on here at the Sea Ranch. Hold on, who's doing this introduction? Yeah, and Marti currently sits on the board of the North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District, and she recently completed a 5-year term on the Coastal Municipal Advisory Council, MAC. Marti, all yours.
Thank you. As Bonnie said, since its formation in 2016, the district has been able to maintain minimum career CAL FIRE staff. We have a robust projection of needed apparatus replacement, and apparatus is the word fire districts use for the engines and all the equipment, and have continuously upgraded the apparatus as scheduled during those years. Almost all administrative functions are performed by volunteers. We do have a paid contract bookkeeper and have for some time, and we hired a part-time admin assistant last November who's just starting out. As Bonnie said, our volunteer base is aging out, and most of the administrative functions are performed by Bonnie, our fire chief. and the volunteers largely are firefighters. Oh, I already said this. I should have changed. Okay. Almost all our revenue comes from our district's allocation from the property tax that we all pay. And our CAL FIRE contract constitutes almost 75% of our total budgeted expenses. We're currently, as Bonnie said, at 2 full-time firefighters on duty. The current funding doesn't allow us to increase our CAL FIRE coverage to the recommended minimum standard, which is 3 on duty, 24/7. We also haven't been able to afford to pay more senior administrative staff than the admin assistant who we've just hired, or to support the kinds of community fire and emergency related community project that we'd like to support. And as Bonnie pointed out, our entire district is very large and extends very far to the east and also to the south, and includes much more acreage than the Sea Ranch. And of course, we'd like to generate enough money to support the building out of the North Fire Station, which is the fire station just adjacent to the chapel. And it was always intended that that fire station would be able to house 24/7 firefighters, which it currently can't do. Next slide. Where we like to be is we'd like to increase our CAL FIRE staffing to 3 people full-time. We know that CAL FIRE is moving in that direction, and we think that would provide the services that our community deserves. In a few minutes, in the next slide, we're going to show the numbers that demonstrate how quickly our reserves would be depleted if we went ahead and hired those additional CAL FIRE people now. And we also aren't ready, we don't have enough money to hire a senior administrative person without depleting reserves as well. So this is a busy slide. We know that busy slides full of numbers make your eyes glaze over. But I wanted to show you this slide because it has all the red ink on it. And also the upper portion of this slide is the slide without Measure H funding. So it demonstrates the various scenarios the board and finance committee had been looking at to go forward with providing increased service levels if we don't have funding beyond what we have now. The first line here is as we are right now. And you'll see that we don't go into the red on an annual basis until the 7th year. But that is really not a possibility over the years because we all know that being so dependent on one person, our chief, for the administrative functions is not a continuing situation that we'd like to see. And the next lines in this section of the slide are various combinations of increasing CAL FIRE staff a little, but not to the level we find appropriate. And then the last line is a paid administrator and the level of CAL FIRE career firefighting staff that we'd like to have. And you notice that that goes into the red in the second year and extends out, and would quickly deplete the reserves that we had. The bottom part of this slide is what it would look like if Measure H does pass. And you'll see some red ink in the second year, and that's because if this measure were to pass, we wouldn't start getting the funding from it until the second half of our fiscal year, because our fiscal year it begins mid-year in a calendar year. And that is not a surprise because, as Chief Akre will explain in his part of the presentation, the allocation methodology for Measure H funding was developed taking into account each fire district's needs. And so we submitted our needs to the group of people who were coming up with that allocation methodology. So next slide, please. So this is a graphical representation of the slide that you just saw. And the difference between the upper interim situations we've considered without Measure H funding show that we have a gradual decrease in our net on an annual basis. And the bottom line is if we included both the senior administrative functions and the increased CAL FIRE career firefighter funding, a dramatic difference. And the next slide shows what it would look like if Measure H passes. And again, that big dip in year 2 would be handled with contributions from our reserves, and then we would be in good shape after the Measure H funding came into play. Okay, so to summarize, while we have done an adequate job since the formation of the fire district in 2016, we've concluded that we can't sustain this performance and we can't make the improvements we feel necessary without an increase in funding. And we have asked ourselves, are other sources of funding available? Next slide. As I said earlier, the fire district is funded primarily by property tax, and that's supplemented by contributions from the VFA. They generally are paying for one of the apparatus we have needed to replace, and they pay for kitting out our new apparatus with all the doohickeys that go on a fire engine that make it operate in real life. The Sonoma County has said that they will not be providing additional funding for fire districts from the general fund. And the two sources of funding that we've been able to identify, one is a parcel tax. Most fire districts have a parcel tax. Parcel taxes are passed by the voters. For example, we pay a parcel tax for the CLSD, and a variety of other added things that you can see if you look at your property tax bill. If we wanted to get as much money as is projected for Measure H, it would be about $400 a partial a year. There's also transient occupancy tax that goes to the county from this region, and that's primarily from short-term rentals and hotels. And we generate in our district a tremendous amount of TOT money. But getting some of this money back from the county is a heavy lift. And Bonnie is more optimistic than I am about getting money from the county, but I think it would be very hard. We do apply for grants for specific projects, but we obviously can't get a grant for hiring people who will stay around because grants are short-term money. Okay.
Thanks, Marty. As you all can see, just by those graphs, we're doing really well right now, but if we do nothing, we're going to see a shortage of funds, which ultimately means we don't have everything we need to fight fires. And I also point out too that the call volume, I don't know if this came through, the call volume of our fire district has increased every year, and we kind of expect that to keep happening from now till forever, particularly with the wildfire situations in California. Does climate change play a role in this? Probably. So we're looking at, these projections look ahead, so now's the time to do something. Next, we're going to hear about Measure H itself, and we're going to hear from Chief Steve Akre. Chief Akre worked for the city of Pinole in West Contra Costa Battalion 7 for a number of years, I think decades. He was appointed the chief of the Sonoma Valley Fire District in 2007, a position he currently holds, and he's also the president of the Sonoma County Fire Chiefs Association. He served in a variety, has served and continues to serve in a variety of leadership roles in numerous fire and emergency management organizations. The Sonoma Valley has been his home for most of his life, and I think he's going to join us remotely from Sonoma Valley. Chief Akre?
I am. Thank you very much. I appreciate the very kind introduction and more so the opportunity to be here today, albeit virtually, to share with you some additional information about Measure H and also answer any of your questions. So I wish the timing would have allowed me to make it from one far corner of the county today to the other and be with you there in person, but alas, it did not. So I appreciate the opportunity that was afforded to be here virtually. So with that, before I get started on Measure H, if I can, I just wanted to say, thank you for all of you who organized this event. This type of a community event, it hasn't happened much in the county. And so kudos to all of you for setting this up, putting the work in, and for all of you who are attending, both virtually and in person. Kind of community town halls or forums are really important avenues to get the word out. And so my compliments on that. And then also big compliments to Chief Plakos and all of her dedicated volunteers. You guys keep the engines running, keep the wheels turning, and keep responding. And it has become a tremendous challenge to do that in an all-volunteer agency, or a primarily volunteer agency. So kudos to you for that service to your community and that dedication. With that, we'll get into Measure H, and if you wouldn't mind hitting the next slide, that would be wonderful. So as fire service leaders, we were on the front lines like many were during the 2017 fires. And while we can go back in history and see that there was the Hanley fire in 64 and others in 46 and 23, in our generation, we hadn't faced that. And so I think we got caught a little bit flat-footed, very honestly, from both an emergency management standpoint as well as fire service. We kept answering the calls, everything kept going well, and the fire service is notorious for doing whatever it takes to get by and not demanding more in terms of service. We just, we kind of suck it up and we do what it takes to get the job done. Well, in 2017, we realized that that wasn't good enough. And so we went about trying to improve services in a variety of different ways, together with a newly formed Department of Emergency Management. You guys have all seen the additional preparedness efforts, the evacuation zones now that we have, the different alert and warning systems that have been expanded. We started to do things with county funding to provide upstaffing for additional resources to respond in all types of weather, whether it was fire weather events or severe storms. And so one of the things that we really saw, though, was, and this was every agency, every fire agency in the county, there just wasn't enough funding. Nobody had enough funding, whether you were a city or a suburban district or a rural district. No one had enough money to provide the level of service that their leadership, their fire chief, and their boards felt they needed to provide to their service. So we came together, a small group out of the, many will remember, the Fire Advisory Council, which connects to what I mentioned earlier about the change in the number of fire districts going, or not districts, fire agencies going from, in 2017, I believe it was 44 or 45, and now we're down to 19, which pretty significant progress. Fire Advisory Council was started in 2014 or 15 to start that process. And out of that came a small working group called the Fire Service Working Group. It was called a couple of things before that, but it ended up being the Fire Service Working Group. And from the start, we in that group worked to try to find a way to improve fire services and EMS services throughout the county. We had one principle with this. It was service equity. We did not look at jurisdictional boundaries. We did not look at fire service zones within the county. We did not look at supervisory districts. We simply looked at the county of Sonoma as a whole, and we used some data collection and analysis tools to try to find where agencies and well, I shouldn't say agencies because I just said we weren't using agencies, but where areas in the county were lacking the appropriate service according to the National Fire Protection Association standards. After getting that data, we then engaged with each of the fire chiefs and heard what their needs were, and we placed Measure G on the ballot in March of 2020. This was placed on the ballot by the County of Sonoma. We got almost 67% of the vote. We got over 65, but we missed by less than 2%. And it needed 2/3 to pass. After that, that was tough. That was really tough for all of us that, worked hard, and for all of the fire agencies to get that close to having a meaningful new source of revenue to provide appropriate service was tough. But the Fire Service Working Group, after just a little bit of a pause to kind of regroup, we started to work again. And what we did, I think, is we took the lessons from Measure G. We took the same principles of Measure G, what we were trying to accomplish. That vision and those objectives never changed. But how we went about doing it and presenting a second option to our countywide voters, that did change. And Could you please advance the slide for me? So there's a number of components that we looked at. One is, we did polling again a couple of times. We did polling in 2021, and it just did not feel like the right time to bring a measure to the voters. We also took lessons, some of the more detailed information from the voters that we polled. And this probably won't come as a surprise to some in the room, there's distrust of the county. And it's not just with leaders that are trying to work with the county, but it's a lot of citizens in the county. Strong distrust of the county. They also at the same time said, you know what, if our local firefighters and fire chiefs say that they need this, we trust them. They're our experts and we trust them. So what we did was we went back and we did a number of things, not in particular order. Actually, it kind of started at the bottom of this slide. We engaged, we were very intentional for the last 4 or 5 years to really build consensus and unity amongst the fire service. This was through the Fire Chiefs Association, through the Fire Districts Association, and with our labor partners and our volunteer associations. We realized with Measure G, we did not have strong unity. There were still some districts, unions, others that were skeptical. They didn't come out and say, no, we don't support it necessarily, but they weren't on board. And that was problematic. So we've got improved union and volunteer involvement. We changed the fire service working group representation. It used to be just fire chiefs, and it was very representative, from geographic to volunteer to EMS to cities to districts. But we realized we had some missing pieces there in representation. So we opened up a seat to an elected fire district board member. And we also opened up a seat for the president of Local 1401, which is the biggest union. They cover Santa Rosa, Rancho Adobe, Goldridge, Northern Sonoma County, Sonoma County Fire District, pretty much everybody other than Sonoma Valley, Petaluma, and Healdsburg. So having them have not only a say, but that involvement in the process was tremendously meaningful. So we continue to work with a political consultant and pollsters, and we did polls again. We are always consistently between 65 and 67% favorable. What varies just a little bit is that margin of undecided voters. And that was why we didn't go out in 21 or 22, was that margin of undecided voters was down to about 1%. And we just didn't feel at that point that we were ready to go for, invest all of those resources to, hope to get every bit of those undecided voters. So we looked at a citizens initiative process. This required a lot more financial investment on the front end to go out and get signatures. But in the end, what it requires is only 50% plus 1 vote to pass. So after a lot of deliberation, we decided that that's the way we were going to go. And we ended up raising $260,000 in the span of about 45 days in kind of mid 2023. And we put that forward to a signature gathering campaign. We got the signatures required and qualified it for the ballot. Go ahead, next slide, please. So the new ordinance that you will see on the March 5th ballot is managed instead of by the County of Sonoma, it is managed by the Sonoma County Fire Chiefs Association. So there is no money that is going directly to the County of Sonoma. And that was a big hangup for voters, as I mentioned before. It was also kind of a big hangup, very honestly, for fire chiefs as we were designing this. So what we did for the allocation this time was similar to what we did last time, but we used an updated program to look at the data, see where the response and service deficiencies were. And then we brought in the fire chiefs again. And this time we brought them in, I think, earlier. And we brought them in with an elected representative, from whether it was their city council or fire district board. And we brought in their labor representative. And we presented the data and showed, hey, this is what we're thinking. This is what you asked for last time with Measure G. What's changed? What are your critical needs right now? And we had some great engagement, great conversations with the different fire agencies and their representatives. And that was the basis for this ordinance and this distribution plan. You'll see in the distribution plan that every single fire agency within the county is allocated some percentage of this tax revenue. That cannot be changed unless it's by the vote of the people. So those are permanent. So fire districts or fire departments don't have to guess, well, how long do I have this money, or could it be taken away from me? It is by law, when this is passed, that is your percentage of this sales tax revenue. A key point in this is that while this offers a tremendous funding source for, again, every fire agency in the county, it does not meet every single need. So when we asked for everyone's needs and did all of our process to come up with the distribution plan, we were sitting between 80 and 90 million dollars in requests in critical needs to provide service. And what we ended up with was being able to only fund, and we went a little bit conservatively, but we went at the 60 million projected annual revenue from this measure. So each fire agency didn't get everything that they asked for or everything that they need, but everybody got a lot of what they needed, most of what they needed. So I think that's an important point. The other thing that we did was we enhanced the community oversight committee. So this is now an 11-member committee that is appointed legally. Some of them have to be appointed by the Board of Supervisors, but in this measure, the Board of Supervisors will receive recommendations or nominees to appoint. The county fire chiefs will appoint, the districts association will appoint, labor will appoint. We also have a couple of citizens at large, and the taxpayers association has a representative. So what the community oversight board is going to be tasked with is receiving an annual report from each fire agency every single year on what revenue they received and how they spent it. And the teeth of this is not, the oversight board cannot change a funding allocation percentage, but what it can do is it can draw public attention to a so-called bad actor. If somebody's just, banking the money and not using it for services without a legitimate reason. They can also go through the attorney general and the grand jury and put pressure on agencies in those manners. We certainly don't anticipate that, but that is the protection in there in case an agency doesn't want to abide by the measures, the buckets of money, so to speak, with how you can spend your revenue. The emphasis again was placed on adding local firefighters and building stations. Probably could have started with this, but Sonoma County, as Chief Plakos and Marti had both emphasized, it's harder and harder to get volunteers. There's a lot of factors in that. There's cost of living, there's training requirements, there's multiple jobs for the parents in a household. It's really hard. And our county's been in transition for, probably about 20 years now, maybe a little bit more. But a lot of the rural areas, especially, that are predominantly volunteer don't have the tax base to be able to afford career staffing. And so that's why this measure actually takes quite a bit of money out of the cities where the sales tax measure is generated and pushes it out to the more suburban and rural areas. And part of that is intentional. When fires start in the rural areas and they're allowed to grow and build, they then affect the cities. The cities also right now go on automatic aid into a lot of the more rural areas because there's not the career staff in those volunteer or rural areas. And then building fire stations. This measure is going to either build 30 new or significantly upgraded fire stations. Again, a big part of this is many of the rural volunteer fire agencies, because of their nature as volunteers, all they had was for a station was basically a barn and maybe a meeting room. You guys can look to your partners to the south. Timber Cove is a great example of that. And this measure will provide Timber Cove with significant funding to upgrade their station, to include, I know that they've got a lot of stuff that they need to do there, but primarily what it is it's to provide living quarters for career staff. So with that, go ahead and advance the slide, please. We talked about a lot of this. I did want to spell out that each of the agencies has, come to us with an ask, and they're going to get a percentage of the revenue. That revenue has to be spent in 6 program categories. It's wildfire prevention, preparedness, emergency response, and veg management. That's a lot of stuff right there. That's primarily what we're doing with adding firefighters. And there's a pretty big component of this that adds veg management capacity. And I'll get into that in a minute. It's also recruitment and retention of local firefighters. This measure is going to allow us to hire about 200 new firefighters countywide. Many fire agencies that hire career folks are struggling right now to get the same amount of applicants and people to qualify for position openings than we did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So, and then it's updating essential equipment and facilities. It does allow for transfer of funds among designated local agencies or entities. So that would mean things like contract for service between agencies potentially, or a joint powers agreement between agencies, or shared services agreement between agencies. So all of that, we tried to keep the toolbox as full as we could for agencies to do what was right for them, and not micromanage anyone. There is some cost for implementation, and then there's a pretty big bucket for countywide expenditures, and I'll go into that with a little more detail in one of the next slides. So I'm ready for the next, please. Okay, I think I talked about all of that already, and I trust that Bonnie, that this slide deck will be in either the handouts or the placed online afterwards, so I don't have to go through line by line.
It's going to be online afterwards.
Okay, perfect. I think the one thing I want to highlight on this is that, like, third bullet point under third sub under the second main bullet point is fully 10% of the allocation of this is allocated to new vegetation management efforts throughout Sonoma County. The big things that we're funding with that is a new year-round fuels reduction crew. It will be run through the Northern Sonoma County Fire District. They have an existing program, so they're the only ones that have an existing program. So it made sense to run that through them. But that is a county-wide resource. It is not just Northern Sonoma County where they will be doing work. We also funded 7 regional vegetation management coordinators / inspectors that will coordinate efforts countywide, but specifically within each of the fire zones. And then we're also funding the first full-time executive director of Fire Safe Sonoma. They've never had Roberta McIntyre, which many or some of you may know, has performed in that role as a volunteer. And we view Fire Safe Sonoma as kind of the lead agency for vegetation management efforts and the coordinating point for CWPPs and the vegetation management efforts. Next slide, please. Okay, I talked about some of this, but so we talked about unity and getting all of the fire service aligned and moving in the same direction to support this and working hard for it. We also spent a lot of time working with partnerships and coordinating support and building relationships with, again, vegetation management, Fire Safe Sonoma, Ag and Open Space. We've done a ton of outreach early this time. Much earlier than we were able to do with Measure G, to the city managers group, the mayors and councils, of course, the Fire Districts Association, taxpayer groups, the Board of Supervisors, civic groups, and business owners. Next slide, please. All right, so some of the countywide benefits. Chief Plakos did a great job of sharing what the specific benefits are to the North Coast, but I talked about some of the veg management capacity, talked about the 200 firefighters and 30 fire stations. Some of the additional countywide benefits are this measure, we designed this to have funding to pay each and every fire agency's REDCOM dispatch fees. As fire districts, we had the luxury, and this will end in July of this year. The county has paid for our REDCOM fees for the last 3 years, or the vast majority of them. That has gone away. But this tax measure picks up that tab, and it's not only for fire districts, but it's for the city partners as well. It also allows us the opportunity to look to expand REDCOM service to be an emergency command center and not just a dispatch center. So that's something that we're excited about. It's not something that's going to happen real quickly, but it is an opportunity that we've provided funding for into the future. I talked about the upstaffing that we had done previously. Well, those funds went away as well. And so now this measure will provide a significant amount of upstaffing funding during those severe weather events. It also builds in monies for technology and training enhancements countywide. So that's an important piece. You know, we're always stronger when we can use common platforms like Tablet Command, like Image Trend, some of those other systems. And there's more that we have lined up, but we just need that funding source and that opportunity. And then I already talked about the recruitment and retention. Next slide.
I think that was it.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. So you took off the questions one? That's fine.
because we're going to continue, and then we have a question slide at the end.
Okay.
Are you able to stick around with us a while more?
Oh yeah, for sure. I had one more thing that I just wanted to update everybody on, and that is, you know, part of this, and you on the coast are especially, I guess, vulnerable to this, and that is, you guys know, and so do we, that fire service leadership, that is that you, Timber Cove, Bodega Bay, struggle because financially, because so much of your districts are owned by the state and county, and you do not receive any sort of either regular ad valorem property tax from that or a special tax for those. And so I think what we've tried to do with this is address that. You'll see that there's a pretty large percentage of money going to some of the coastal areas this time, and much more so than was allocated in Measure G, because we're seeing that that challenge. I also know that you guys struggle, as many of our fire districts do, with ERAF and even redevelopment takeaways from our property taxes. And separate from this, but I did want to just share with this group that I sit on the Cal Chiefs e-board, and together with the Fire Districts Association of California, we are actively working on ways that we can try to address. It's not going to be a repeal of ERAF, but we're actively trying to work out ways that we can return funding to fire districts that have lost so much through ERAF. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you. Sorry that I probably went a little long.
No, that's fine, Chief. Thank you. I'm gonna- So this is me again. And just, we wanted to touch a little bit on the details of if there additional funding is available, how exactly would it be used on the coast? We talked before about needs, and obviously it's kind of the same thing, but it's worth mentioning that we really do want to increase our career CAL FIRE staffing to 3 on duty, which are at the moment means 9 full-time people. In the future, it will probably mean more than 9 full-time people because some of the union rules are probably going to change. Right now, it's 9. Yeah, we already talked about this. Why do we need it? We'd like to meet standards. Our calls are going up, our volunteers are going down. We're using our CAL FIRE people much more heavily than we used to. We want to be able to hire staff to manage day-to-day administration and support. There are a lot of things that we would like to be doing as a fire district that we are simply not able to because of the time restraints. The number one thing we do, obviously, is keep the wheels rolling and respond to 911 calls. That's number one, and we will always, always do that. But there are plenty of other things where, as a government agency, we should be able to support the community, but we're just not able to. Things like, helping homeowners understand how to navigate the grant process, to do roadside clearance and vegetation management and things like that, to do a better job of educating the community on home hardening and things like that. We would really like to be able to do that. We'd also like to seek appropriate grants, and that's difficult to do. And we touched on the North Fire Station, and Marty did too, but just informationally, that station, which was built in 1986, was considered only half built. It was always planned to build a residential part, and the funding has never been available. But we would like to be able to have sustained 24/7 housing there. We could also use maybe just a little office space to work in. That'd be good. We don't have that. And we're out of space for apparatus and storage. We really want to expand the station, have 2 more bays, and maybe have better training facilities, more than our one kind of funny shaped room. Chief Akre mentioned this, but this is really important in the big picture. You mentioned Timber Cove, our partners down the road. They are an all-volunteer fire department, and they're a lot smaller than we are. It's interesting, even though we're a bigger district and we have a bigger budget and all that stuff, if you look at the allocation, in the Measure H, Timber Cove actually gets a slightly larger allocation than we do because the allocations are based on need. We are already able to sustain some career firefighters. Timber Cove can't sustain any career firefighters. And so the plan there is, if they can get additional funding, is, as Chief said, to upgrade their station or build another one or do something so that they can have residential station, 24/7 coverage, and then fund some career firefighters very similar to the model of what we're doing here. It would probably be CAL FIRE. It could be somebody else. That's something they would have to work on. But remember I mentioned that our 2 people are the only 24/7 staffed firefighter, from Mendocino to Bodega Bay to Geyserville. So they cover a lot of territory, and having some 24/7 coverage between here and Jenner would be very beneficial, you know, as you imagine. Okay, so, okay. Just if anybody's interested, a lot of people have endorsed Measure H, and this is a list of some of them. There's a full list at that website address. And these slides will be available. And there's a couple of other information sources. I don't expect you to memorize that, but those slides will be available. And I think we want to thank you. We're not done yet. I think it goes back to George now.
Thank you, Bonnie and Marty and Steve. We're going to open it up for some question and answers now, both from the folks who are present here in the hall, and I don't know how many we have remotely, but remote people too. You can, they can be added in for questions and answers. And if you have a question and want to direct it to a specific individual, fine. If you just want to throw out your question, and the best person to answer that will do that. So let's sort of open it up for any questions. Yeah, Jennifer, and you can come up to the mic.
That's so it'll be on the recording, and so people who are remote can hear.
Thanks for having this event. This has been really informative. So I have about 3 questions, but I'll try to make them all be part of the same thing. As I was thinking about how do I convince my friends to vote for this, I was thinking that most of them probably don't think about the difference between the fire district and the life support district. But this doesn't fund the life support district. But when you call 911 and you need someone because you've hurt yourself or you're sick or something, who is it that comes? It could be the fire district or the life support district, right?
We both come, always.
Both come together, so you'll get 2.
You'll get an ambulance and you'll get the fire department.
And I think that's important for people to realize, that they think it's just the life support districts that they will always come, you know, and so maybe some information that we could share with people about the importance of voting for Measure H if you want to keep the fire people coming would be really helpful, like just a couple of bullet points or something that we could share.
We can, we're trying to have a lot of information on our website. There's a lot of details there, the kind of stuff that's been here. Something that I do have to just, you may have noticed in the way that Marty and I talk, we can't tell you to vote for Measure H, and I wouldn't. I would never do that. What we want to do is provide information so that people are well informed and they understand the issues, they understand what the measure does, they understand what the fire department does, and then they can make their own choice.
Sure,
But
but
we do have information on the website. If you have some ideas to share about how
I'll
to get
think
the
about that and
information
get
out,
back to you.
I would really appreciate it because it's difficult.
Well, it's important to know when Bonnie said we can't do this. It's because the Brown Act forbids public agency officials from advocating for a tax measure. So we can present facts, and that's our role here. And it is a fact that CLSD and the fire district people respond together.
I would be happy to send some information out. Oh, I'd be happy to send some information out to my friends in the community who I think might not understand why they would need to vote for this or why it would be in their interest. And so
There's some one-page flyers on the back on paper, and they're also linked from our website that is like a little summary of what does it do on the coast.
okay,
So that might help. Feel free to take some of those.
I'll do that. Thanks.
Did you have other things you wanted to
Well,
ask?
there was one thing that caught my attention when Chief Akre mentioned it, which was that it's not only difficult to get volunteers, but he also said something about it being difficult to recruit and retain professional firefighters. Is that, did I mishear?
Chief, did you want to answer that? Go ahead.
There were staffing shortages.
So, thank you for asking the clarifying question. There are not staffing shortages right now, but when in the past we used to have literally hundreds of people show up for firefighter openings, we're now lucky to get a dozen. And so there's a change. I think the pandemic has had some impacts on that. Certainly maybe some generational changes, but there's also been a shortage. There's a change in many agencies in the county now, or most agencies in the county are trying to hire paramedics. And when you look to hire paramedics, that's a smaller applicant field than what firefighter EMTs or firefighters with first aid, entry-level firefighters are able to bring. So there has been a shortage. I know, again, during COVID, there was, it was hard for paramedic schools to keep the classroom doors open and keep churning out paramedic students. So we're having to be more creative, and that's not a bad thing necessarily, but we are having to be more creative in how we recruit and some of the things that we focus on in terms of not only recruitment, but retention. And the other thing, if I could, Jennifer, is go back to your previous question and make just one addition to the response that that Bonnie gave was, we were intentional about making this a sales tax because we realized that a lot of fire districts already have a parcel tax that places the burden on property owners, right? And this tax, while some will argue and there's evidence for it that it's regressive, in our position was that this is kind of a level playing field for taxes because it taxes all of our residents, whether you're a property owner or a resident, and it ends up taxing all of our visitors because our visitors use our fire and EMS services. And without something like this, they really don't pay anything for it. So we felt like that was an important consideration. And as opposed to going for another parcel tax that would burden especially those in the rural areas more so than in the suburban areas, we felt that sales tax was the right way to go about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Go ahead, Paula.
Hi, I'm Paula Smith. They can't advocate, but I damn well can. I've got my card here. If you want to help, I'll be glad to give it to you. This is an essential service, and these people work hard. So we need to help them.
Thanks. Deb Scully, you had your hand up.
Deb Scully, I just want to have a clarifying question. Was I hearing that is because it's a citizen petition, it's only 50% plus one? Hooray.
Yes.
What a great strategy that was. Thank you very much for doing it.
Jackie, did you have a question too? You had your hand up? Oh, you didn't? I'm sorry. Anyone in our Zoom audience?
I want to ask something. Chief Akre said something about ERAF. Like, I don't know that acronym. I don't know what it means. Please explain. Thank you.
Are you going to?
I'll start. This is a topic we could be here all day and you would all be lying on the floor with your fingers in your ears. But Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund. It's something that happened in 1992, 93, 94 to help restore funding for schools after there was a deficit for that after Proposition 13. And the path that ERAF has taken through many bills and everything is very, very complicated. And we actually have an unfortunate amount of information on this on our district website if you want to go dive into it. The really short version is because it was a one-size-fits-all, quickly written piece of legislation or pieces of legislation with various calculations and formulas that were based on things that had happened at that time in the 80s and early 90s, but may not have continued now. It has the unintended consequence of being wildly disparate in how, and the idea was take a little bit of money from everybody, from the cities, from the counties, from the districts, from municipalities, everything. Take a little bit from everybody and give it to the schools because the schools need money. Sounds good. But the way the calculations have turned out, we here have been particularly burned by ERAF because of the ad valorem property tax, which you might call your Proposition 13 property tax, your 1%, that is initially allocated to fire protection. 46% of ours goes to ERAF. If that didn't happen, we wouldn't be having this conversation at all. The next closest ERAF shift in the county is poor Timber Cove at 18%. Most of it's 5 or 6. Northern Sonoma County has a negative ERAF. They receive money from ERAF instead of give it. I mean, it's insane. And it's very complicated, and it's been impossible to fix. I know Chief Akre just said, he's talking about it. We know the Fire District Association of California for the last couple of years has been trying to figure out, what do we do about ERAF? And their approach, as far as I know, the last time I heard, was to not try and have a fix-it legislation, but to try and get some legislators to really pay attention and understand what the problem is, and like hand the problem back to the legislature and say, you caused this, you fix this. The amount of money year before last that was lost by fire agencies all over the state was $94 million, which pays for a lot of staff and a lot of fire engines. Captain Plakos wants to comment on this because
Well,
it makes him crazy.
And I should say, before Paul gets started, we sued the county over this and lost a lawsuit about the unfair calculation methodology, and then we appealed and lost the appeal.
Okay, I don't even remember what he said, other than it was an acronym. I'm like, what is that?
Well,
and I
and
had no clue. And it's like, okay.
It has been devastating for us, and it's an issue which has affected all the fire districts.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify, and Bonnie's right, I get all worked up about ERAF. Our revenues per year after ERAF are how much? 1.8 million?
About, yeah, 1.6.
About 1.8 million in revenue we receive from a portion of your 1% property tax. So a piece of your property tax comes to North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District. That equates for the whole 172 square miles into $1.8 million. And that is after 46% has been taken away by ERAF. And again, there's no doubt we have by far the greatest ERAF shift in the state. And as Marty said, we sued the county when we became a district, saying, we're a new district, this has to get recalculated. County of Sonoma said, no, we're calculating it correctly. We lost, we appealed, we lost, and now it needs to go the legislative route. And maybe we'll have a forum about that someday.
I don't know if Chief Akre has anything to add, but this, we didn't mention this in the presentation because even if we had a solution in the wings, then that would be great. But there is no solution anywhere in the site. So maybe in a decade it'll get fixed, I don't know.
So this, I just want to say to Paul that on Saturday, February 10th, all 7 candidates for the 2nd Assembly District are going to be here from 3 to 5 p.m. I will be asking questions. Please write that in a form of a question so I can ask them. And they are going to be vying for your votes.
Chief, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add, I that's very, very accurate. I think the one piece that unfortunately this doesn't bode well for districts and just kind of adds fuel to the fire, but the legislature did after the first couple of ERAF shifts make some attempts to make cities whole from their share of the ERAF loss, but they never did anything for special districts. And so that's what the Fire Districts Association, Cal Chiefs, and our other partners are trying to rectify now. And like I said, we're not thinking that getting ERAF reversed is possible, but we are actively looking at other ways that we can get funding to make up for that ERAF shift.
And if any of those groups want a poster child, call us.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think we know about ERAF now.
Go to the website, there's lots of.
Oh, there's more.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Yeah, Steve, come on up.
About a month ago, we had a event called Taking Part. And at that Taking Part, a lot of the questions came up about the fire department and its association with the TSRA, with the Sea Ranch Association. And I found myself constantly explaining to people that we are not a Sea Ranch organization, and they do not fund us except through property taxes. And comments as to our relationship with?
Yeah, I think that's very important, and it's a topic that many people are confused about. And indeed, the first 15 years I was a sea rancher, I was confused about it too. But the fire district is a public agency, and it extends way beyond the Sea Ranch borders. And the Sea Ranch Association, there is not a legal relationship between the Sea Ranch Association and the North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District. So they're totally separate. Obviously, the Sea Ranch Association is glad that we have a competent fire department, and but there's no money that changes hands there and no mechanism for that either.
Was there another question in the back? Yes.
Forgive me for bringing this perspective, but I can't help myself. I'm always impressed by what our fire officials do in the state. But I realize that you're operating at the county level. But this is part of a much larger picture, is it not? What we're dealing with here is in the context of climate change, right? Isn't that why we need more firefighters? We need more fire stations, we need more money. So where does this fit into the state action plan? Does it? Maybe Chief Akre can answer this, or Bonnie, or Marty. Does this fit into a larger plan over the next 10 or 20 years to help us fight climate change?
I don't actually know how to answer that. My initial answer is this is very much focusing on the county, but our county is dealing with the same issues that almost all counties are dealing with in the state. So this isn't particularly part of a plan that I know of, although Chief Akre may have something more informed to say. But right now, I'm just looking at the county.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie. So that's a complicated question, and topic for sure. I think a lot of what we're seeing and what we're responding to, it is definitely associated with climate change. I mean, we're seeing more severe weather, both in terms of hot and windy and fire conditions, but also the winter storms. I mean, the winter storms that you guys dealt with and the impacts last year, and I know we sent strike teams up to, help out from within the county. Those are significant impacts, and I think any of us would be we would be hard pressed to legitimately say that they are not impacts of climate change in one way or another. To your point, we are actively engaged, and you've got a lot of local representation on the California Fire Chiefs Association, which is a statewide organization. The president this year is Chief Hine from Sonoma County Fire District. The immediate past president is Chris Tubbs from Marin County. I'm on the e-board, as is another member of the Marin County Fire Chiefs. So we have a lot of representation in the North Bay, and we are working with our legislators, the California Fire Districts Association, as I mentioned, as well as probably the most powerful, very honestly, the most powerful fire service association in terms of statewide politics, and that's the California Professional Firefighters. We now have joint legislative priority setting meetings, trying to address a lot of different needs within the fire service. And certainly climate change and its impacts are heavy. We talked about recruitment and retention earlier, and training. Those are both key initiatives that we've introduced legislation on at the statewide level. I also want to just be really pragmatic, and that is, we can make effective, meaningful change a lot easier at the local level than we can at the state level. And I think that's just, to me, that's just the way things are. It may not necessarily be right, but when we're looking at solutions, it tends to be more attainable and quicker for us to make those changes at the local level than the statewide level. Doesn't mean that we're not making those efforts, but we have to take care of ourselves and not wait for the big state machine to spool up and solve our problem. I will say that what we're doing here in Sonoma County right now with Measure H, it is at the forefront of what counties and local agencies throughout the state are looking at. This is a model of what we've done that it is being paid attention to very, very closely and intently throughout the state. And so I think I think the countywide is a nice balance between each of our local agencies going out for something separately. It's kind of the right size to me to solve this problem because we all travel within our county, and we've got some really good organizations, the chiefs, the districts, and a big, well-represented union that we all care about the county. And so I think this is the right size for us to move this initiative forward. But believe me, efforts are being made on the statewide level as well.
Was there another? Yeah, go, please, Ara.
I don't have a question, but if I could make a comment. Thank you. My name is Ara Chakrabarti. Maybe some of you might not know me, but I work for RCMS, our community healthcare providing entity in this area. And during the last January storm, we were able to keep our clinic open 24 hours, 7 days because of the support and the help and the coordination that was provided by Bonnie and her team, along with CLSD and the South Coast Fire Department. I personally know a situation when I was incapacitated, middle of the night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, call 911, and Bonnie's team came and helped me out. So my request, strike that, my strong suggestion to the community, this is, passing this measure is a investment on us, for us. It is an insurance so that we can live in this community and feel safe. That we can go to sleep at night knowing that if an emergency happens, man-made or natural, that we can call on North Coast volunteer firefighters and they will come and help us. So let's do our thing here. Let's pass this measure. Let's vote for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ara.
Thanks, Ara.
Have we got any other questions? Linda, would you like to thank you all for coming, and I'll let Linda wrap it up.
If there's any other comments, if not,
I'd like to make a
okay,
comment.
go ahead. Marti.
I see Menka Sethi, the community manager of Sea Ranch, sitting in the back. And I'd like to, on the behalf of the board of the North Sonoma Coast Fire Protection District, I'd like to thank you for coming and listening to this, because you and are incredibly important people in the community, and I appreciate your taking the time to come. Thank you.
And thank you for letting the Forum Committee use the Del Mar Center, because this is a great venue.
Anyone else want to make any comments? Dave? Okay. So I want to give you a little preview of the next two scheduled forums. The next one I mentioned. What? Okay.
I know that Chief Aker has taken time out of his Saturday to join us, and I just wanted, and he may not need to know about the next forum. So I just really wanted to thank you again, Chief, for joining us. You were very informative and very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all very much. I really, really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to speak with all of you, and hope for the best on March 5th. So thank you.
And I'd like to add my thanks as well, and to thank you and the other members of FSWAG for the fabulous job you did building this measure and involving those of us in far-flung, tiny, remote areas with respect and concern, and taking our input as seriously as you all did to come up with a really fair measure. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to disagree a little bit with you on that. You guys are the ones making service happen in your community, and you're to be commended for that. And I spent over 30 years as a volunteer, even within my career jobs as well. So you guys are the heart and soul of the community, and great appreciations to you, as I know and I've heard your community supports you, but you have a very high degree of respect from all of us at the Chiefs Association and Districts Association as well. So thank you. And Jackie, very nice to see you.
Yeah. And Steve, this will be on YouTube, and we'll get you the link. So if you want to share it to other people so that others who weren't here might be able to see it throughout the county.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank
Sure.
you, everyone. And happy rest of your weekend.
Thanks. So the other two forums I mentioned, Saturday, February 10th, all 7 candidates for the 2nd Assembly District in California are going to be here in person. One is coming all the way from Del Norte County to be here. I'm thrilled about that. So send me questions through the website to our email, the cranchforum@gmail.com. So I have questions ahead of time to ask them. And the next one after that is Saturday, March 9th, I think it is. Check the date. And that is to celebrate the 50th production of the Sea Ranch Thespians. And we're going to have Carol Emery and a couple other people, directors and such, talking about the Sea Ranch Thespians. So thank you for coming. And a tradition of the Sea Ranch Forum is that we take our chairs and we put them in the rack as we say goodbye. So thank you.